America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching The Black Athenians. Now I come to you Friday at 4-ish. And that's going to be earlier than 4 later on in the spring or in the fall, but we'll talk about that another time. But I come to you every Friday trying to give you kind of the local political education that you need in order to make your people whole, and your people are my people. So I want black people to know what I know so that we can fight the fight that makes our community wholes. And the idea is that I do this in Athens, Georgia, tailored to Athens, Georgia, but it will work in anywhere where there are poor black people in proximity to wealthier white people who pretty much are wealthy because of the fact of poor black people. So
you mean everywhere?
I mean everywhere. There's a slight echo.
I hear it. I do hear it over here.
All right, so I want you to go to that and pick one of the other options. I suspect any of them will do. Except that one, because it's going to come through the TV. Okay, no, it's good. Okay, I guess it's not coming through the TV.
Yeah, I muted it.
Good. All right, so what I want to do is click that button right there. Yeah. Now we should be good. All right, so welcome. This is The Black Athenians. My name is Irony. You can go to thefunkyacademic.com, and it will help us get better technical stuff so that we won't have to do this so often. Go to thefunkyacademic.com and give me, sign up for $5, $15, or $50 a month, and it'll help make the process more smoother. But I want everyone to know what I know so that we can be made whole black people. And what does that mean? In terms of political education, today we're going to talk about panel etiquette. Now, panel etiquette is not necessarily a soft skill. It's more of a political sensibility. If you know anything about me, I'm very suspicious of people who talk about soft skill. It's just like I'm suspicious of people who talk about financial literacy. Black people, the reason we don't have money isn't because we're not financially literate, nor is it because we lack manners. It's because of expropriation and exploitation, and people make a lot of money off of keeping black people poor. So financial literacy without finances is not a solution. And the people selling financial literacy, and there are people selling it, from the academics to the hustlers, are just selling you, they're just selling you DVDs out of their car, man. They're just selling you a scam. Because our problem is not financial literacy, our problem is finances. And our problem is finances because we need to use politics in order to claw back the money that's been expropriated out of our communities. But today I'm talking about panel etiquette. And someone taught me about panel etiquette when I was an undergrad at Berkeley, and it's actually been a very useful way to think about joint projects in life. If you're sitting on a panel and the person next to you on the panel gives an answer to a question that's good enough, let it go. I'll say that again. If you're sitting on a panel and the person next to you on the panel gives you an answer that is good enough, it might not be appropriately specific for your sensibilities, and it might not be the best directions to get from point A to point B, but it'll get them there without wasting too much of their time, let it go. Right? And that's panel etiquette. It's a really kind of simple sensibility, but it actually bleeds into a lot of other things. And I'll tell you about those other things once we hit the beat. Go ahead.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no feature in your front.
So we were talking about panel etiquette and the fact that if you're on a panel and you're next to someone else who's on a panel, and they give an answer that is good enough, you just let it go. Even if it's not the way you would have actually done it, even if it's not exactly right. I mean, if they tell you that 3 + 3 = 7, you have to stop and say, I actually know, here, let me draw on the board, and we'll count up the hashtags, and 3 + 3 will equal 6. But if the answer is good enough, You let it go. And and the inability to do that is a form of political immaturity. Because you don't know, if you can't do that, then you don't know what good enough means, and you just can't let things go. And political immaturity makes it hard to build power, because you build power by sharing power. And this is a thing we'll talk about in a few minutes. You build power by sharing power. People want to pretend that it's not true. Unfortunately, it's just how things are. You build power by sharing power. If you try to build power by hoarding power, you'll just be alone and without power, and you'll have to substitute violence, and the other side will always have more violence. So you build power by sharing power, but you can't share power with psychopaths for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about later. But one thing about panel etiquette that it draws out is one way to control people is to control everything around them, including the answers they give, right? Or the answers that are given. And if you can't let that go, you probably are pretty controlling in general. And you probably like to control things in your house. Freedom is a matter, and I've given this before, but if this is your first time watching me speak, I'll just give it again. Freedom is a matter of being able to disturb the world, right? So one way that we can keep people under control is saying, like, you can do what you want, but the world has to stay exactly the way I want it to stay. So you're giving them the illusion that they have freedom, but since they can't disturb the world, they can't actually do anything, because freedom is a matter of disturbing the world. It's like going into a really, really, really nice house and then like having to use the bathroom, but you can't even use the towels because like the towels have to be like, or you can tell they're like artisanal towels or whatever. And you can't even use the soap because like you can tell the soap is
never been touched.
It's literally never been touched, and it's like artisanal. It's like very fancy design soap. So like you can't even be free to take a poop because like you can't disturb the world. You can't like wash the towels, and you can't use the soap. Like you can't do anything that goes along with actually like moving your bowels. So
think of it, I guess, as your old grandmother's house where there was furniture with plastic on it. You were never allowed to sit on it.
That's just a black people thing, man. Like, the amount of houses I've been into with furniture with plastic on them.
Well, growing up, what was interesting for my grandparents was the plastic was on there and you still weren't allowed to sit on it.
Yeah.
like I never.
Yeah, there are levels, man. All right, so controlling the answers that are given by other people is a way of controlling their ability to disturb the world, which is a way of controlling their expressions of freedom. And the panel is a joint project, which means everyone gets to contribute, and there isn't a strong hierarchy on it. So your inability to let a sufficient but not your answer go, to just let it go, is probably speaks to a different sort of propensity to be controlling. Right.
And I was going to say earlier, since the first time you introduced this idea to me, I've applied it to my house because it makes life so much easier.
Right.
Like we don't have arguments for 3 hours over little stupid mispronunciations
right.
things like that.
No, you have arguments over big things.
Yes.
Things that matter. If they're things that are substantive. And when I'm in a meeting, usually my presence is known. In a meeting, I've been in a lot of meetings. I have no problem disturbing the peace. But one of the reasons why I give good meeting is that when I disturb the peace, it's over something substantive and memorable. It's not quibbling over like an answer that was previously sufficient. So that's about panel etiquette, and panel etiquette a lot about political maturity, being able to know what to let go and what's important, and exercising judgment in that way. And it's a skill. It's a skill, and it's something that needs to be practiced. And I hope you learned it here, and I hope you take it in other aspects of your life. If someone next to you gives a sufficient answer, you let it go, because the panel itself is a joint project. And now I decided to do a show on this because I was talking to my friend, and she's white, and she was talking about how it's really hard to drive with white guys in the passenger seat. And she's brilliant. She's like, written a stack of books, and she's like, it's really hard to drive with them in the passenger seat today. And she said, like, look, I've always dated guys who are pretty poor, because like I couldn't ever date. I dated one rich white guy, and I had enough of that. And so I've always dated guys who are pretty poor, and so like I've always had the car, and they've been like not. But there's something about white guys that they really have a hard time not either driving or not like bickering when I'm driving. And she's actually a wonderful driver, and she's, like I said, brilliant, has like degrees from fancy schools and like tenured faculty, like all of that. So the idea that if I'm in the passenger seat of her car and she doesn't take the off ramp that I would have taken, that she won't figure it out and we won't get to the place that we're going to get to. I'm like, she can read like 7 languages and has written a stack of books. I just always assume that like
She'll figure it out.
she'll figure out how to drive. But apparently the guy she dated have a hard time letting her just kind of drive. And that just means we make bad white guys, but we just make bad white people. So about panel etiquette being a control thing and the ability to exercise it being an ability to be mature in your political sensibility, it's because if you cede power to a psychopath, they will use that power to throttle you. Like if you give a psychopath rope, they will hang you with it. Right, when it works out for them. So, and white people, we train them to be a variety of sociopaths, and so they assume everybody else is a sociopath, and so they're going to be controlling because they know like the evil in their own heart. So there's that. Also, you grow power by sharing power, and if you're not used to sharing power, then you're not going to ever actually grow it in a substantive way. You'll substitute violence for power in a way that's untoward. And it's one of the reasons why federalism works, right? In order for the nation to be a nation, we needed states. In order for states to actually work as states, they need cities, and cities need their own government. And so like it's these interlocking centers of power that make the whole unity work in the United States. So that's important, and that's also an insight that's granted by Hannah Arendt in her book On Revolution. It's a comparative study between the French and the American Revolution. In the French Revolution, it was run by poor people who like wanted to get food. So once they got food, they were always poor, and all they knew was want. So they just wanted more. It wasn't about like rich people trying to govern themselves. It was about poor people trying to get food, and people who only know want, like, aren't cared about governance, they're cared about like acquisition. So what happened was, if the people who led the revolution in France weren't concerned about governing as much as they were concerned about like acquiring things, and they let the government over to the estates that like met, but they were alienated from the people, and they had to have a succession of revolutions, and that's why revolutions don't stick. As opposed to the American Revolution, this is Arendt's argument, that was founded by, pretty much rich guys who just wanted to govern themselves, which means that they weren't led by want, they were led by like dignity and stuff like that. So there were these interlocking town hall meetings that led to bigger town hall meetings, that led to constitutional congresses, and it was all about kind of networked governance as opposed to acquisition, because it was all done by people who were wealthy. They'd figured the acquisition problem out by slavery and oppression and like all of these other issues. It would have been more interesting if poor people had led the Revolutionary War, the American Revolution, if it was led by slaves and all that. That would be fascinating. But that wasn't what happened. So it was the interlocking centers of power that actually secures the United States against ongoing violent revolutions. But it was the idea that you don't grow power by hoarding power, you grow it by sharing it. And if you try to grow it by hoarding it, you'll always be suspicious of the people under you. You'll always be suspicious of the people under you. You'll think they want to slit your throats because they might want to slit your throat. And you'll never actually be free because you never actually know what anybody thinks of you, because they don't have the power to actually tell you. And you'll never actually know your most innermost self because you need other people in order to know your most innermost self, because you might be blind to it. You don't even know if your jokes are funny. Like if you're like, how many white guys don't even know if they're funny? They think they're funny, but they're not.
I spend a lot of my time telling them that.
Yeah. You think you're funny, but you're not. Yeah, and then how
You know,
many?
a lot of white guys just, they're friends, and yeah, you have to be telling them their jokes suck.
Yeah, and then there are a lot of women in general who don't know that like what they get just because their looks until they hit 50. and then they're like, people aren't as nice to me. Yeah, because they were only ever nice to you because you were pretty. You were always boring. You were never funny. You were always boring. But like it just like it didn't matter as much because people enjoyed like your boobs being in their presence. So the same with rich guys and pretty women. Like it's all they have a distorted sense of reality because they are controlling people, and they haven't shared power with them. They're just it's a relationship of control. So they have a distorted sense of reality, and have a distorted sense of who they are, and then it turns out nobody goes to their funerals because nobody really liked them anyway. Nobody really liked them. They were boring. Or you go to a boring person's funeral. You go to one of these boring people's funeral, you just decide like what life is about because nobody has anything to tell about them because they didn't do anything. And that is sobering. Go to one bad funeral and you will be a new person.
You might even stop going to funerals.
You might even stop going to funerals. So you grow power by sharing power, but sharing power is dicey if you're black and you want to grow power by sharing power. You're either sharing it with white people who are sociopaths, or you're sharing it with black people who are desperate and will sell you out to sociopaths because money in America is white, and for a variety of reasons, that's just where we are. So it's a puzzle how to grow power without sharing it with a sociopath. And the only way to fix this problem is to make white people less sociopathic and black people less desperate. Like that's the only solution. That's the only solution because you can't share power with a sociopath for a variety of reasons, and you can't share power with anyone who's desperate because they'll just sell you out of desperation. The desperation is a little. I mean, they're both sicknesses, but either one's coerced by their circumstances or they're coerced by their sociopathology. Either way, sharing power with them is a dicey operation. But if you don't share any power at all, you'll never grow power. And that is the problem of Black America, Black movement building in general. And it comes out in panel etiquette, but really it's about the deep understanding that growing power entails sharing power. And it also entails being burned. You're going to be burned because sharing power is a risk. And that's just one of the risks it takes if you want to actually build a movement. Yeah. Nothing. So it's very important. You grow power by sharing power. A sign that someone can't share power is that they can't even let an answer go on a panel if the answer is good enough. That means they don't even know what good enough means. And if you're dealing with someone who doesn't know what good enough means, that means you're dealing with someone who's not used to thinking, because what thinking means is trying to figure out like what's good enough and what's not good enough. What's good and what's not good, what's appropriate and what's not. All right, so I hope this has been, engaging and thoughtful, and I hope this has helped you realize maybe some tick that you have about why you're slow to share power. It might be you. It might not just be you. It might be the fact that everyone you're around is desperate. So share power with them, like it opens you up to exploitation that way. Or it might be that everyone you're around is a sociopath. So sharing power with them, because we churn out sociopaths like this. Like in black communities.
I don't think you can snap fast enough for it.
They're just like, you need multiple hands. Need to be some Gemini. So like in black communities, we turn out desperate people. You can't even get clean water. In white communities, they turn out a sociopath because they're trained on how to treat black people like garbage. So if you're a black person, like sharing power is going to be hard. That means growing power is going to be hard. So it also means you need the political maturity to be burned a few times. knowing that that's the only way forward. And that the only way forward is to make fewer white sociopaths and fewer desperate black people. But those are political problems that require political solutions. We need to get into we need to start dismantling white schools, families, and churches. And we need to start getting black people paid good money for the work that they do. So that'll make, because it's these schools, families, and churches that make white people sociopathic. It's not the biology, it's not the pigment of the skin, it's the schools, family, and churches. So we need to reform all of them by force, because we ask them nicely, they're not going to do it. So we need to take them in receivership and reform the schools, families, and churches. And black people, the desperation isn't a sign of financial literacy or anything else, or it's a lack of soft skills. It's because the United States does not pay black people for the work that they do. So we need the quality, and by force, we need to force employers to pay black people for the work that they do and make black communities whole by something like reparations or something like that. So those are the solutions. I've explained to you how, one of the non-obvious barriers to growing power is because we're scared to share it. And I've legitimized why we're scared to share it. Because the people we would share it with, will use it to oppress us in a variety of ways. One will take advantage of us because they're desperate, and the other will take advantage of us because we've trained them into being sociopaths. I hope this has been clear. I hope this has been exciting. This didn't solve the problem. It clarified it. This isn't an excuse not to share power, because if you can't share power, you won't grow it. It is to give you a little bit solace for the next time you share power and you're burned by it. It might have been the only way forward. So, thank you for your time. This has been short. Cindy, you got anything to? No, it's good. Thank you for your time. This has been a pleasure, and I hope you share this with all of your friends and associates and all the people you will go on panels with and all the people that you care about. And if you think you want me to do more of these, which I will do every Friday, but if you want me to do them and not fall into poverty, because believe it or not, given this quality of political wisdom makes me somewhat unemployable, I'm going to need you to go over to thefunkyacademic.com and sign up for either $5, $15, or $50 a month, or give a one-time enormous donation. But you can do all of that on the left panel of that website. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week. Peace.